The sound was not of a body falling. It was the sound of a life being shattered. First came the sharp crash of baccarat crystal against imported Italian marble. 1,000 shards of glass sprayed like deadly diamonds across the living room floor. And then the thud. Dry. Heavy. The sound of 154 pounds of flesh and bone collapsing without any defensive reflex. Harrison fell face down. The impact made his teeth clench hard, cutting the inside of his mouth. The metallic taste of blood immediately mixed with the bitter taste rising from his throat. He tried to breathe, but the air seemed to have turned into liquid cement. His lungs burned, demanding oxygen, but the command did not reach his diaphragm. He was drowning on dry land. His eyes, wide and bloodshot with panic, focused on the intricate pattern of the Persian rug. That rug he and Sloane had bought in Dubai on their engagement trip. Every knot of that fabric seemed to mock him now. "Get up!" he screamed inside his own head. The command was desperate, furious. "Move your hand, move a finger. Harrison, get up!" But nothing happened. His body had become a prison of inert flesh. The paralysis had started in his feet, climbed his legs like an icy vine, and now crushed his chest. The only things that worked were his senses. He heard everything, the hum of the central air conditioning, the tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hallway, and the rhythmic, calm, terrifying sound of stiletto heels approaching across the wooden floor. Click, clack, click, clack. There was no hurry in those steps. There was no stumble of desperation, nor the rush of help. They were the steps of someone strolling through a museum. Harrison saw, from the corner of his paralyzed eye, the red shoes with red soles stop inches from his nose. He could smell her perfume. Chanel, the same one he gave her every Christmas. A scent he once associated with love and desire, and that now carried the unmistakable scent of death. Sloane did not bend down. She remained standing, a tower of coldness above him. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the wet, repulsive sound of someone taking a sip of a drink. Harrison heard the liquid slide down her throat. She was drinking. He was dying at her feet, and she was finishing her wine. "You know, Harrison." Her voice floated through the air, velvety, calm, as if they were discussing the wedding guest list and not a murder. "I always thought you were stronger. Or perhaps the poison was just weak." Harrison felt a solitary tear roll down the corner of his eye. The only physical reaction his body allowed. It was not sadness. It was hatred. A pure, incandescent hatred. He had planned everything. He had swapped the medication in the bottle that morning. He knew she was trying something, but he thought it would be gradual. He wanted to catch her red-handed, giving him the wrong medicine. But he underestimated her greed. She did not use the medicine, she used the wine. The wine he drank at lunch, served by her hands with a smile and a toast to the future that would now last only a few more minutes. "It took months," Sloane continued, walking slowly around his body, like a predator inspecting its downed prey. "Small doses in the coffee, in the juice, but you are stubborn. Your heart is strong as an ox. I had to speed up the process. Tomorrow is the wedding, after all. I couldn't risk you backing out at the altar. Widow is a much more elegant title than divorced or abandoned, don't you think? And much, much more profitable." She stopped again in front of him. With a casual movement, she stretched her leg, and with the sharp, hard tip of her heel, kicked Harrison's inert hand. The pain was acute, but he could not pull back. "What a waste of a suit," she sighed, looking at the expensive fabric crumpled on the floor. "I hope it doesn't stain the carpet with drool or vomit. Do you know how much it costs to clean blood from Persian silk? It's a fortune." It was then that the outside world invaded their bubble of horror. The service door, which led to the kitchen, opened with a creak. Quick, light footsteps of rubber sneakers, and the scent. Not of expensive perfume, but of lavender and coconut soap, the scent of a clean home, the scent of Hayes. Hayes entered the room humming softly, carrying a tall stack of freshly ironed white towels. She stopped abruptly when she saw the scene. Time froze for a second. The housekeeper looked at her boss sprawled on the floor. She looked at the fiancé standing, with a wineglass in her hand and a cruel smile on her lips. The towels fell from Hayes's hands, spreading like white clouds across the floor. "Mr. Vance!" Hayes's scream was visceral. It was not a polite scream. It was the scream of someone who sees a tragedy befalling someone they love. She ran. She did not care about etiquette, about hierarchy, about anything. She threw herself to the floor beside him. Hayes's knees hit the marble hard, but she did not feel it. Her trembling hands went straight to Harrison's face. "Mr. Vance, for heaven's sake, talk to me." She gently shook his shoulders, afraid of hurting him. "Ms. Kensington, what happened to him? He's not breathing. Call emergency services. Quickly." Hayes pressed her ear to his chest. Harrison's heart was beating like a bird trapped in a cage, erratic, failing. "It's beating, it's weak, but it's beating." Hayes raised her head, eyes full of tears, staring at Sloane. "Ms. Kensington, why are you just standing there? The phone? Where's the phone?" Sloane looked at Hayes with such profound contempt it seemed physical. She swirled the wine in her glass, watching the red liquid ripple. "Get your hands off him, you gutter trash," Sloane said, her voice icy. "You'll get his shirt dirty with your greasy hand." Hayes blinked, not understanding. The shock of that sentence hit her like a slap. "What? He's dying. Can't you see? He's turning purple." Without waiting for her boss, Hayes plunged her hand into the pocket of her blue apron. Her fingers, calloused from bleach and hard work, fumbled for her old cell phone. Its screen cracked. She needed to call 911. She needed to save the only man in that house who treated her like a human being, who asked about her mother, who greeted her with eye contact. Hayes unlocked the screen with difficulty, tears blurring her vision. I am going to call for help," she sobbed. Sloane moved. Not slowly this time, but with the strike of a snake. She took 2 steps forward and with a precise and violent movement slapped Hayes's hand. The cell phone flew far, spinning in the air, and shattered against the rustic stone fireplace. The battery bounced to one side, the shattered screen to the other. Hayes looked at the destroyed device, then at Sloane. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The horror of understanding began to consume her. You broke my phone," Hayes whispered. "I broke it," Sloane smiled, and it was a terrible smile. "And I will break you too, if you do not shut that filthy mouth." "You want him to die," Hayes said, the phrase coming out as a trembling accusation. She stood up, backing away, placing herself between Harrison's body and the woman she now saw as a monster. "You did something to him," Sloane laughed. A loud laugh that echoed through the high ceiling of the room. "Me? Oh, darling, no one will believe that. Look at me." Sloane spread her arms, displaying her silk dress, her jewels, her perfect skin. "I am the grieving fiancé, the victim of a tragedy. And you? Who are you, Hazel? The cleaner, the servant, the invisible one?" Sloane took a step forward, cornering Hayes against the sofa. "Do you really think anyone will believe a nobody's word against mine?" Sloane lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Today, Hayes, I become a widow, and the heiress to an empire. And you'll be tomorrow's newspaper headline. Obsessed maid poisons boss for unrequited love. What do you think? It's a good title." Hayes felt her stomach churn. Fear paralyzed her, but indignation spoke louder. "You are a demon! I'm going to scream! I'm going to tell everyone!" Hayes tried to run towards the front door, but Sloane, driven by insane adrenaline, grabbed Hayes's hair. She pulled hard, violently tilting the maid's head back. Hayes screamed in pain. "You're not going anywhere," Sloane hissed. With her other hand, Sloane pulled something hidden inside her bra, a small dark glass vial with a faded skull label. There was still a residue of white powder at the bottom. Sloane forced her hand into Hayes's apron pocket. "No, let go of me!" Hayes struggled, scratching Sloane's arm, trying to kick, but Sloane was taller and had the advantage. Sloane managed to shove the vial deep into the cleaner's pocket. Then she grabbed Hayes's wrists and forcefully rubbed them against her own neck and arms, scratching her own skin with Hayes's short nails. "Attack me! Come on! Leave your mark!" Sloane screamed, insane. "Stop! You're crazy! Help! Someone help me!" Hayes cried, tears streaming, terror taking over. Harrison watched everything from the floor. It was a medieval torture. To see the woman who planned his death framing the only innocent soul in that house. He tried to bite his tongue, tried to inflict pain on himself to break the shock, but nothing worked. He was a camera turned on, recording hell. Sloane abruptly released Hayes, pushing her. Hayes fell onto Harrison's body again, instinctively trying to protect him. Sloane took a deep breath. She ran both hands through her hair, tore the thin strap of her silk blouse, exposing her bare shoulder. She looked in the entrance mirror, saw the red mark on her own neck. Perfect! She ran to the window, threw it open and began to scream. A high-pitched, blood-curdling scream, an Oscar-worthy performance. "Help! Security! She's armed! She's going to kill him! Someone help me!" "No! Please, no!" Hayes sobbed, holding Harrison's cold hand. "Mr. Vance, wake up! Tell them it's a lie!" Seconds later, the sound of heavy boots in the hallway. The main door was kicked open. 2 private security guards, enormous men in black suits, entered with weapons drawn. Behind them, the driver and the cook peered in, terrified. The scene was perfect for Sloane's narrative. The dead millionaire on the floor, the crying bride with torn clothes leaning against the wall, and the maid bent over the body, her hands on his chest. Get her off him!" Sloane screamed, pointing her trembling finger. "She poisoned him! I saw it! She attacked me when I tried to take the poison from her hand! Hands up, now!" the security guard yelled. Hayes raised her hands, trembling, her face bathed in tears and mucus. "No, it's a lie! It was her! She put it in my pocket!" Hayes cried out, but her voice was choked with sobs. One of the security guards did not wait for explanations. He advanced, grabbed Hayes by the collar of her uniform and threw her against the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of her. He twisted her arm behind her with unnecessary force. "Clear!" the security guard yelled. "The woman is contained. Call the police and an ambulance." Hayes groaned in pain, her face pressed against the expensive wallpaper. She saw Harrison from the side. He remained motionless. The following minutes were a blur of chaos. The sirens arrived too quickly, piercing the night of the upscale neighborhood. Red and blue lights danced across the living room walls, lending a nightmarish air to the scene. Chief of Police Baxter entered. A middle-aged man with a stern expression who frequented Sunday barbecues at Sloane's father's house. Sloane ran into his arms, crying profusely. "Uncle Baxter, thank goodness, it was horrible." She sobbed into the chief's shoulder. "Harrison, he just collapsed, and I saw her. I saw her laughing with a vial in her hand." The chief patted Sloane's back and looked at Hayes, who was handcuffed in a corner, guarded by 2 officers. His gaze was one of prejudgment. "Calm down, my dear. We'll sort this out. Where is the vial?" "It is in her pocket. I saw her put it there when I walked in," Sloane lied with terrifying naturalness. The chief of police signaled to a female officer. "Search her." The officer reached into Hayes's apron pocket. Hayes closed her eyes, praying the vial had vanished, hoping it was a nightmare. "Here, Chief," the officer said, holding up the vial with gloved fingertips. "It has white powder residue. It looks like rat poison or arsenic." A murmur ran through the household staff watching from the doorway. "Murderer," someone whispered. "It is not mine," Hayes screamed, desperate. "She put it there. She attacked me. Look at my broken phone. She broke it so I could not call for help." The chief of police walked up to Hayes. He got very close, invading her personal space. He smelled of tobacco and arrogance. "Listen here, girl. Do you really think anyone will believe that Ms. Kensington, one of the most respected women in this society, would plant poison in a cleaning lady's pocket? Do you think we are idiots?" "But it is the truth," Hayes pleaded, looking at the paramedics who were placing Harrison on the stretcher. "Mr. Vance knows. He heard everything. He is not dead. He is listening." "He is in a coma, you lunatic," the chief retorted. "And if he dies, your situation will go from attempted murder to aggravated homicide. Take her away." Two police officers grabbed Hayes by the arms and began dragging her out. It was the walk of shame. Passing through the room she cleaned with such care every day, passing by her co-workers, Beatrice from the kitchen, Mr. Arthur the driver, who averted their gaze out of fear or shame. Sloane stood in the middle of the room, wiping away her fake tears, watching the spectacle. Hayes resisted at the door. She needed to see Harrison one last time. The stretcher was passing her at that exact moment, heading for the other ambulance. Harrison was pale, with an oxygen mask covering his mouth and nose, but his eyes were open, and they met Hayes's. There was a moment of absolute silence amidst the chaos, a spiritual connection. Harrison saw the terror in that innocent girl's eyes. He saw the loyalty, and the fury within him broke, for a thousandth of a second, the chemical barrier of the poison. He focused his entire existence on his right eyelid. It was like trying to lift a mountain with an eyelash, but he succeeded. He blinked, once, slow, heavy. Hayes saw. She stopped struggling. He was alive. He was there. That blink was not a spasm. It was a sign. "I know, I saw. Hold on tight." "Hurry up!" The officer pushed Hayes into the cold, hard patrol car. Hayes fell into the back seat, the handcuffs biting into her wrists. She saw through the barred window. Sloane approached the patrol car before they closed the door. The villain bent down with a victorious smile that did not reach her eyes. "Do not worry about Harrison, dear," Sloane whispered to Hayes, low enough for the officers not to hear. "I will take care of him at the hospital. I will make sure he has an end. Quick and painless. As soon as I get the doctor's signatures, I will turn off the machines. Pray for him to go to hell quickly." The door slammed shut, muffling Hayes's cry of protest. The siren turned on. The world spun, and Hayes was taken into the darkness. The 4th Precinct station was not a place for human beings. It was a repository of hopelessness. Hayes was thrown into a holding cell with 3 other women. The smell was an unbearable mixture of sour sweat, mold, sewage, and cheap cigarette smoke. The floor was damp and sticky. Hayes huddled in the farthest corner, hugging her knees to her chest. She shivered from the cold, despite the stifling heat of the night. Her cleaner's uniform, once a source of pride for being her honest livelihood, now seemed like a ridiculous costume in that place. "Hey, princess of the mop!" A woman with a face scarred and tattooed grumbled from a filthy cot. "Stop crying, you're giving me a headache. What did you do? Stole the boss's silverware?" Hayes shook her head, unable to speak. If she told the truth, that she had been accused of trying to kill a billionaire, they would probably beat her, thinking she was a liar or rich. The hours dragged on like centuries. Every minute was torture. Hayes thought of her mother, Mrs. Ruth, alone at home, waiting for her to return with the week's money to buy her blood pressure medication. Who would take care of her mother now? Would the police notify her? Or would her mother see her daughter handcuffed in the morning newspaper and have a heart attack? The thought made Hayes sob louder. "Shut up!" the inmate yelled. Suddenly, footsteps sounded in the hallway. A guard hit his baton against the bars. "Hazel Davis, visitor, lawyer." Hayes's heart skipped a beat. Lawyer? She had no money for a lawyer. Would the state have sent someone so quickly? She ran to the bars, gripping the cold metal with trembling hands. In the hallway, lit by a flickering fluorescent light, stood a man who did not look like a public defender. An impeccable pinstripe suit, shining shoes, a genuine leather briefcase. He had an oily, condescending smile. Mr. Sterling. Hayes had seen him at the estate a few times. He was Sloane's family lawyer. "Good evening, Hayes," he said, keeping a safe distance from the bars, as if her poverty were contagious. "Quite a complicated situation you're in, isn't it?" "Mr. Sterling," Hayes said, her voice hoarse. "You need to help me. It was Miss Kensington. She set everything up. How is Mr. Vance?" The lawyer sighed, opening his briefcase with excessive calm. "Mr. Vance is in critical condition. The doctors say the dose of poison was brutal. But I didn't come to talk about his health. I came to talk about your future, or the lack of it." He pulled a document from the briefcase. "I spoke with Chief of Police Baxter. The evidence is irrefutable, Hayes. Fingerprints, the substance in your pocket, the fact that you were alone with him. The prosecution will ask for 30 years. Attempted felony murder if he passes away. You will enter here young and leave an old woman straight to the grave. And your mother? Well, poor Mrs. Ruth, alone, sick. Who will take care of her? She will end up in a public nursing home, forgotten." Hayes felt her legs give out. The mention of her mother was the low blow she hadn't expected. "No, not my mother." "Exactly," the lawyer smiled, seeing he had found the weak point. "But Miss Kensington is a merciful woman. She understands that people from your class sometimes make desperate mistakes for money." He extended a sheet of paper and a golden pen through the bars. "If you sign this confession now, admitting it was an accident, that you accidentally mixed up his medication, we can make a deal. Ms. Kensington will not press aggravated criminal charges. You get involuntary manslaughter, no intent. With good behavior and our contacts, you'll be out in a year, maybe 6 months. You'll go back to taking care of your mum." Hayes looked at the paper. The letters looked like moving snakes. "I, Hazel Davis, confess that I administered a toxic substance. It was the easy way out, to sign, to bow her head, to accept the injustice and save her mother. The system had already decided she was guilty. Why fight?" She took the pen. The metal was cold. The lawyer smiled, victorious. But then the image came to her mind. Harrison's gaze, that single blink. It was not the look of someone who had given up. It was the look of someone trapped and needing her. If she signed that, she would be condemning Harrison to death. Sloane would be free to pull the plug and inherit everything. Hayes looked at the pen, then at the lawyer. The fear in her chest transformed into something warmer. Indignation, anger, dignity. "If I sign this," Hayes said, her voice firm for the first time that night, "I will be saying that I am a murderer, and I am not. Do not be stupid, girl." The lawyer's smile faltered. "It is your only chance. It is this or 30 years. Hayes let go of the pen. It fell to the corridor floor with a metallic sound. Then Hayes took the confession paper with both hands and tore it in half. The sound of the paper tearing was loud in the silence of the police station. She tore it again and again, until it became confetti. She threw the pieces at the lawyer's face through the bars. "Tell your boss," Hayes said, holding the bars, looking into the man's eyes, "that I will not sign anything. I did not put poison in that glass, and she knows it. And tell her that if she lays a finger on Mr. Vance at the hospital, I will scream so loud the whole world will hear, even if it's from inside this cell." The lawyer stepped back, wiping a piece of paper from his lapel with disgust. His face turned red with anger. "You just signed your sentence, you wretch! Nobody rejects an agreement from Sloane Kensington. You will rot here, and your mother will die of heartbreak knowing her daughter is a criminal." He turned his back and marched away, the sound of his expensive shoes fading down the hallway. Hayes was left alone. The adrenaline subsided and the crying returned, but now it was a different kind of crying. It was no longer from panic. It was from war. In the high corner of the wall outside the cell, a small television crackled. The early morning news was on. The anchor spoke with a grave expression. Hayes raised her swollen eyes. Harrison's photo appeared on the screen. Urgent, billionaire Harrison Vance fights for his life in the ICU of St. Jude's Medical Center. His fiancée and sole heir, Sloane Kensington, prohibits visits and doctors cite irreversible damage. Family lawyers are already preparing for the succession of assets. Hayes gripped the bars until her knuckles turned white. Irreversible damage, she whispered. She will kill him today. Hayes looked around the filthy cell. She did not have a year. She did not have 6 months. She had hours. Harrison was alive, trapped in his own body, waiting for her, and she needed to find a way out of there. Now. The sound of the stamp hitting the metal table echoed like a coup de grace in the cold police station room. It was the sound of bureaucracy deciding the fate of a life. Hazel shuddered. She had been sitting on the hard plastic chair for hours, her clothes still dirty from the mansion floor, the smell of sweat and fear clinging to her skin. Her hands, once calloused only by honest work, were now stained with the black ink from the police booking, ink that seemed like it would never come off. "You have luck you do not deserve, girl," the public defender said, without even looking at her face. He was a young man with deep dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled shirt, exuding the weariness of someone who sees dozens of lost cases every night. The duty judge accepted the habeas corpus, not because he believed in your innocence, but because the system is overcrowded and you are a first-time offender, have a fixed address, and care for an invalid mother. Hayes held the cheap pen with trembling fingers. Signing that paper felt like signing a pact with the devil. "I did nothing, doctor," she whispered, her voice like sandpaper, raspy after so much crying in the cell. "I swear on my mother's life, it was Miss Kensington. She planted the vial in my pocket." "Aye." The public defender stopped organizing his papers and finally looked at her. There was pity in his eyes, but it was cynical pity. "Listen, Hayes, what you did or didn't do doesn't matter now. What matters is what's in the police report, and the report says you were caught red-handed with the murder weapon in your pocket on top of the victim. A cleaner's word against the word of an entire society." He lowered his voice, leaning across the table. "Your freedom is provisional. It's hanging by a thread. The restraining order is clear, 500 meters away from the Vance estate and 500 meters from St. Jude's Medical Center. If you breathe near Miss Kensington or Mr. Vance, you're going back to that cell. And next time I won't be here to get you out. Understood?" Hayes nodded, swallowing her tears. "I understand, doctor. Good. Now sign this and get out of here, and pray the man does not die. Because if he dies, the charge changes to aggravated homicide, and then, my dear, not even God will get you out of jail." Hayes signed. The line was shaky. As she walked out the heavy door of the police station, the pre-dawn wind hit her face like a cold slap. The city was deserted. It was 3:15 in the morning. The silence of the streets contrasted with the chaotic noise in her mind. She had no money for the bus. She had no cell phone to call a rideshare app. Hers lay in pieces in the mansion's fireplace. She was alone, miles from home, branded a criminal. Hayes started walking. With every step, the newspaper headline flashed in her mind like a warning neon sign. Irreversible damage. Sloane was going to pull the plug. She was going to finish the job, and Hayes was the only person in the world who knew the truth. Go home, she thought. Hug my mother, lock the door, and wait for the police to come get me again. It would be the safest. It would be what any sensible person would do. But then Harrison's image came to mind. Not the unattainable millionaire, but the man who, last week, had insisted she take the rest of his birthday cake to her mother. The man who asked if she was tired. The man who, even paralyzed and dying, spent his last ounce of energy to wink at her. That wink was not a goodbye. It was a plea for help. "I cannot let him die," Hayes said to the empty street. "I cannot." She stopped at the corner. To the right, the path to the humble neighborhood where she lived. To the left, the wide avenue that led to Kingswood, the wealthy neighborhood, the mansions neighborhood. Hayes turned left. She walked for almost an hour. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers. The cold seeped in through the tears in her uniform, but the adrenaline kept her blood warm. She needed the evidence. Harrison's phone. The audio recording. She saw him fiddling with the device before he collapsed. She saw him reaching his hand into the couch cushion seconds before the attack. Sloane, in the arrogance of someone who had already won, probably hadn't even looked. The police, satisfied with the poison in the maid's pocket, also wouldn't have searched the couch. It was there. It had to be. When the Vance estate appeared at the end of the street, it looked like a horror movie castle. The windows, usually lit and welcoming, were now black holes in the white facade. The iron gate was closed, but there were no guards. Sloane must have taken everyone to St. Jude's Medical Center to ensure no one got near Harrison. Hayes felt her stomach churn. If she were caught there violating the restraining order, her life would be over. She circled the block, heading to the back. The wall there was lower, covered in thick ivy. Hayes knew that blind spot. Once the gardener had forgotten the key and climbed over there. She threw her cloth bag over the wall. She gripped the thick branches of the climbing plant and pulled herself up. Her arms trembled with effort. A loose stone from the wall scratched her knee, tearing her tights and drawing blood. But she bit her lip to keep from screaming and pushed herself forward. She fell on the other side, onto the soft, damp grass of the conservatory. The impact made her ankle throb. The silence in the house was absolute. Not even the crickets seemed to dare sing there. Hayes crept through the shadows, pressed against the house wall. She reached the service area window, locked. She went to the kitchen door, locked. Panic began to rise in her throat. What if she couldn't get in? Then her eyes landed on the pantry's tilt-and-turn window. It was ajar, just a crack, left that way for Sloane's Persian cat, Fifi, to come and go at night. It was narrow, very narrow. Hayes silently dragged a trash can to the wall. She climbed up. She carefully pushed the glass. The hinge creaked, a sharp sound that seemed like thunder in the silence. She froze. She waited. Nothing. She pushed her head through, then her shoulders. The metal frame pressed against her ribs. She had to exhale to get her hips through. The metal scraped her skin, hurting her, but she wriggled through and dropped into the dark pantry. As she fell, her foot hit a metal shelf. A can of peaches in syrup tumbled down. Clang, clang, clang. The noise of the can rolling on the ceramic floor was deafening. Hayes cowered on the floor, covering her head, waiting for the lights to come on, the gunshots, the screams. Her heart pounded so hard it ached in her chest. 1, 2, 3 minutes passed. Nothing. The house remained silent. She stood up, trembling. She brushed the dust from her uniform. She crossed the stainless steel kitchen, which gleamed eerily under the moonlight streaming through the window. She walked through the service hallway. She reached the living room, the crime scene. The room was cordoned off with yellow police tape. Crime scene, do not cross. There was something profane about that tape. The room's scent was still the same as that fateful night. The sweet, cloying perfume of Sloane. The acidic smell of wine spilled on the carpet. And more subtly, the metallic scent of dried blood where Harrison had hit his mouth. Hayes ducked under the yellow tape, feeling like an intruder in her own story. She went to the caramel leather couch. She knelt on the floor, exactly where Sloane had been sitting, watching her fiancé die. Hayes felt a shiver down her spine, as if the ghost of Sloane's evil was sitting there, laughing at her. "Please, God," she whispered. She plunged her hand into the deep crevice between the seat cushions. Her fingers fumbled through the darkness of the upholstery. Coins, crumbs, a pen. Cold sweat began to trickle down her back. What if the police took it? What if Sloane found it? She pushed her hand deeper, up to her wrist, scratching her skin on the hard leather. Her fingers touched something smooth, cold, rectangular. Hayes held her breath. She pulled. Harrison's black iPhone. Hayes let out a muffled sob, clutching the device against her chest as if it were a child. It was there, his salvation. Her freedom. She pressed the side button to check. The screen lit up, illuminating her face with a ghostly white light. The lock screen photo was a mountain landscape where Harrison liked to hike. In the upper right corner, the battery icon was red. 3%. "Thank goodness," she whispered. "It is here. I got it." She was about to stand up. She was going to run out of there, go straight to the police station, shove that phone in the arrogant chief of police's face, and save Harrison. But then the garden outside lit up. Powerful xenon headlights swept across the room through the linen curtains, cutting through the darkness like knives of light. The sound of a V8 engine rumbled in the driveway, followed by the sound of tires crunching on gravel. Hayes froze. The blood drained from her face. Someone had arrived. Car doors slammed. Voices she knew all too well. "Are you sure you locked the electric gate, Julian? I do not want the press snooping around here." It was Sloane's voice, shrill, irritated, without any trace of the weeping widow from the police station. "I locked it, relax. Nobody is getting in here, the house is sealed by the police, woman." A deep, arrogant male voice replied. Hayes recognized him instantly. Dr. Julian Thorne, the family doctor, the specialist who had been treating Harrison's mysterious illness for months. The man Harrison trusted with his life. The key turned in the front door. The lock clicked. Hayes looked around, desperate. She was in the middle of the living room, exposed. There was not time to run to the kitchen. They would see her crossing the hallway. The sofa was not tall enough to hide her. The curtain, the heavy brown velvet curtain that covered the glass balcony door. It was the only place. Hayes threw herself behind the curtain, pressing against the cold glass of the balcony door. She held her breath, praying her feet were not showing beneath the fabric's hem. The living room door opened. The crystal chandelier's light came on, flooding the room with brightness. "What a stench of poverty," Sloane complained as she entered, tossing her designer bag onto an armchair. The sound of her heels echoed on the wooden floor. Click, click, click. "It's the stench of that maid's fear," Dr. Julian Thorne laughed. "You should have seen her face when the chief of police found the vial in her pocket. It was Oscar-worthy, Sloane. You outdid yourself." Hayes peeked through a tiny gap between the velvet and the wall. Sloane was stunning. Even at 4 in the morning, she wore a tight, low-cut black dress, a sexy morning style. Dr. Julian Thorne, a tall man with graying hair and an imposing demeanor, walked to the bar and opened a bottle of champagne. The cork popped with a festive sound that seemed obscene in that house marked by tragedy. "Let's toast," Julian said, handing a glass to Sloane and embracing her by the waist with possessive intimacy. Hayes felt her stomach churn. They were lovers, the whole time. Harrison was surrounded by snakes in his own bed and in his office. "To Harrison's end," Julian raised his glass, "and to the beginning of our management of the Vance fortune." "Don't celebrate yet, Julian." Sloane took a long sip, her eyes fixed on the carpet where Harrison had fallen. "That bastard is strong. The poison paralyzed him, but his heart keeps beating. The heart monitor in the ICU sounded like a war drum. He is fighting." "It is only a matter of time, my love," Julian said, sitting on the couch. It was the exact couch where Hayes had found the cell phone seconds earlier. He ran his hand over the leather, as if he already owned everything. "The potassium I will inject into his IV line tomorrow at 9 a.m. will cause a massive heart attack." Hayes's eyes widened in the darkness of her hiding spot. Potassium injection, cold-blooded murder, with a scheduled time. Less than 5 hours remained. "Are you sure it is safe?" Sloane paced back and forth nervously. "What if they request an autopsy?" "I will sign the death certificate, Sloane." Julian laughed at her concern. "I am the attending physician. Cause of death: multiple organ failure due to prior intoxication. End of story. The body will go to the crematorium before lunch. In the afternoon, you will be the richest and most coveted widow in the country, and I the man who will console you." "What about the cleaner?" Sloane asked, stopping her pacing. "The cleaner is the cherry on top. The poison was with her. She will get 30 years. She will die in prison. She is the perfect culprit. No one will ever look at us." Hayes felt warm, silent tears stream down her face. They had planned every detail. Harrison's life, her freedom, her mother's pain. Everything was just a stepping stone for them to get ahead in life. Hatred began to boil inside her, replacing fear. Suddenly, Harrison's cell phone, which Hayes was clutching tightly against her chest, vibrated. Bzzzt. It was a short sound, dry. The critical battery, 1% warning. But in the silent room, that hum sounded like thunder. Sloane paused with the glass halfway to her mouth. Julian froze on the couch. "What was that?" Sloane asked, her eyes narrowing like a snake's. "What was what?" Julian asked, but already on alert. A noise, a vibration. It sounded like a cell phone. Hayes stopped breathing. Her heart was beating so hard against her ribs that she thought they could hear it. Thump, 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 thump. "It must be the refrigerator, Sloane, or the wind. You're being paranoid." "No." Sloane slammed the glass down on the coffee table, spilling champagne. "It came from over there, from the window." She started walking towards the curtain where Hayes was. Click, clack, click, clack, the footsteps of death approaching. Hayes looked back. The glass balcony door was locked from the inside with a safety latch. If she tried to open it, it would make noise. If she stayed there, she would be discovered. And they wouldn't call the police this time. They would kill her right there and say she broke in to attack them. Self-defense. Sloane was 2 meters away. Hayes could see her elongated shadow projecting onto the living room floor. "Someone's there," Sloane whispered, signaling Julian, who grabbed a heavy whiskey bottle by the neck, using it as a club. Sloane reached out with her long red nails to pull back the curtain fabric. Hayes did not think. Survival instinct took over. The second Sloane touched the velvet, Hayes violently flung open the curtain, screaming with all the force of her lungs to startle them. "Ah!" The effect was immediate. Sloane, caught by surprise, screamed and tripped over her own high heels, falling backward onto the wooden floor. "It's her!" Sloane shrieked, rolling on the floor. "Get her, Julian!" Dr. Julian Thorne leapt from the sofa, knocking over the coffee table, charging like a bull. Hayes did not wait. She ran toward the kitchen. It was her only chance. The back exit, the pantry window, anything. "Get back here, you tramp!" Julian roared, running after her. He was fast, much faster than Hayes had imagined. Hayes slipped on the waxed hallway floor, violently hit her shoulder on the corner of the wall, the pain radiating down her arm, but she did not let go of the cell phone. That was Harrison's life. She entered the kitchen. She tried the back door. Locked. Damn it, she needed the key that hung on the hook. She fumbled along the wall in the dark. Where was the key? Where was the damn key? Julian's heavy footsteps entered the kitchen. "I got you!" The doctor's large, strong hands grabbed Hayes's uniform from behind. He pulled her with brutal force, throwing her against the marble kitchen island. The impact knocked all the air from Hayes's lungs. Her spine cracked. The cell phone slipped from her sweaty hand and slid across the kitchen floor, stopping under the refrigerator. "No!" Hayes cried out, trying to reach the device. Julian pinned her against the marble, his hands going straight for her neck. His thumbs pressed against her windpipe. His face, once elegant, was now a red mask of murderous fury. "You heard, didn't you? Heard what you shouldn't have," he snarled, tightening his grip. "What a shame. We were going to let you live in prison. Now you'll have to suffer a fatal accident here." Hayes scratched at his hands, kicked his shins, but he didn't budge. Black spots began to dance in her vision. The air wouldn't come in. The world was darkening. "Sloane, bring the knife!" Julian shouted into the room without releasing Hayes's neck. "We'll say she broke in with a knife and I had to defend myself." Sloane appeared in the kitchen doorway, disheveled, her eyes gleaming with madness. She held a large chef's knife, which she had taken from the silver cutlery set in the dining room. "Hold her tight, Julian," Sloane said, smiling. "I'm going to love doing this." Hayes looked at the gleaming blade approaching. She looked at the cell phone lying 3 feet away. She was going to die. Right there. In the kitchen she cleaned with such care, murdered by the people who swore to protect Harrison. No. A primal fury exploded within Hayes, the fury of someone tired of being a victim. She gathered all the strength left in her legs and, bending her knee, delivered a precise and violent kick between Julian's legs. The doctor let out a guttural sound, a howl of pure pain. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The pressure on Hayes's neck vanished instantly. He fell to his knees, vomiting and clutching his groin. Hayes gasped for air, coughing, and threw herself to the floor, sliding towards the refrigerator. "You bitch!" Sloane screamed, advancing with the knife raised. "Die!" Sloane brought the blade down forcefully. Hayes rolled to the side at the last second. The knife hit the porcelain tile floor, sparking millimeters from Hayes's ear. Hayes used the momentum and kicked Sloane's ankle. The villainess, unbalanced by her heels, fell on top of the doctor, who was groaning on the floor. That was the split second Hayes needed. She grabbed her cell phone. She stood up. The glass door leading to the garden was there, locked, without a key. Hayes did not hesitate. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron pan that was on the dish rack. With a battle cry, she spun her body and hurled the pan against the tempered glass. Crash! The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, raining shards over the garden. Hayes covered her face with her arm and jumped through the jagged opening. Glass shards tore her uniform, cut her arms and legs, but the pain was just fuel now. She fell onto the wet grass outside, rolled, and got up running. "Get her! Shoot her!" Sloane's hysterical voice came from inside the lit kitchen. Hayes did not look back. She ran to the back wall. Her ankle ached, the cuts stung, her neck throbbed where Julian had choked her, but she flew. She jumped the wall, landing awkwardly on the back street. She ran until her lungs burned like fire, until the taste of blood filled her mouth. She crossed neighborhoods, alleys, squares. She only stopped when her legs gave out and she collapsed inside a concrete playground structure in a deserted park square miles away. Trembling, covered in dirt and blood, she pulled her cell phone from her pocket. "I did it!" She sobbed, laughing and crying, hysteria taking over. "I did it, Mr. Vance. It's here." She wiped the blood from the screen with her torn sleeve. She pressed the side button. She needed to hear the recording. She needed to be sure it was saved. The screen lit up. The Apple logo glowed for a second. And then the screen went black. In the center, a red battery icon flashed once and went out. Hayes pressed the button again, frantically. No, she hit the phone. "Turn on, please turn on." Nothing. Dead. The battery was drained. Hayes leaned her head against the cold concrete, despair returning with full force. But then an even worse thought struck her, a thought that made her blood run colder than the pre-dawn chill. When the screen lit up at the mansion, she saw the lock. The phone had a password. Harrison was a businessman. The phone was armored. Even if she could get a charger now, she did not have the numeric password, and she remembered with crystal clarity Harrison setting up the device months ago. Biometrics, Hayes. It is the safest. Only my finger opens this. Hayes looked at the black, useless device in her hand. She had the proof. She had the confession. But it was locked inside an impenetrable digital safe. And the only key to open that safe was Harrison's index finger. The finger of a man who was in a coma, guarded by assassins, inside a hospital's ICU miles away. Hayes looked at the sky, which was beginning to lighten on the horizon. It was almost 5 in the morning. The potassium injection would be at 9. 4 hours. She had 4 hours to get into a guarded hospital, get past security, reach the ICU, take the finger of a dying man, and unlock the cell phone, all while being sought by the police. Hayes wiped away her tears. The crying was over. There was no more time for fear. She raised her head, her eyes burning with a determination she did not know she possessed. "I will get into that hospital," she whispered to the dawn, "even if I have to set the entire city on fire." She put the dead cell phone in her bra, near her heart, and began to walk, limping, bleeding, but without stopping. The war had begun. The dawn sky offered no hope. It was the color of a purple and gray bruise, weighing heavily on the rooftops of the outskirts, when Hayes finally turned the corner of the cobblestone street. Her lungs burned as if she had swallowed ground glass. Her legs trembled, not just from the exertion of the marathon she ran fleeing the estate, but from the toxic adrenaline of fear. The cut on her arm, a vivid red line made by the window shards, pulsed with a painful rhythm, sticking the uniform fabric to her skin. She stopped before a rusty iron gate peeled by time. Dogs barked in the distance, a constant soundtrack to that forgotten neighborhood. It was Mr. Arthur's house, the Vance family's driver for 20 years, the man who had watched her grow up, who had given her a ride the day her mother fell ill, and who had been summarily fired by Sloane the night before as if he were disposable trash. Hayes knocked on the cold metal with her injured hand. The sound was metallic and hollow. "Mr. Arthur!" she called, trying not to shout to avoid waking the neighbors, but the urgency in her voice was uncontrollable. "Open up, please. It's Hayes." Silence. Only the sound of the wind rattling a loose shingle on the roof. The house seemed closed, lifeless. "Mr. Arthur, I know you are in there. Please, they are going to kill Mr. Vance." The yellow porch light came on, casting long shadows across the concrete backyard. Heavy, shuffling footsteps approached. The front window creaked open on old hinges, and a tired face, swollen from lack of sleep, appeared through the security bars. Arthur held a kitchen machete in his hand, his eyes wide with fear and suspicion. "Hayes?" He squinted, trying to focus on the disheveled figure at the gate. "My goodness, girl, did you escape from jail? The police are hunting you on television. I saw it in the morning paper. I did not run away, Mr. Arthur. I was released. Habeas corpus." Hayes approached the gate, ignoring the machete's glint. She gripped the cold bars. "But I need your help. Ms. Kensington, she and Dr. Julian Thorne, they are lovers. They planned everything." Arthur slowly lowered the machete, but made no move to open the gate. He shook his head, an expression of pain and defeat on his face. "Hayes, go away. For God's sake, I have a family. That woman is the devil. Her head of security called me this morning. He said if I spoke up about anything from the house, he would burn down my shack. I was fired without any rights, Hayes. Nothing. 20 years of service thrown away. Mr. Arthur, listen." Hayes reached into her bra, frantically fumbling, and pulled out the black cell phone, now a cold dead weight without a battery. "I got Mr. Vance's phone. I broke into the estate and got it. He recorded everything. Her confession is in here, but it's locked and out of battery. I need to get into the hospital to unlock it with his fingerprint." Arthur looked at the phone, then at Hayes's red, desperate eyes. He saw the dried blood on her forehead. He saw her torn clothes, dirty with soil and grass. He saw the insane courage of someone who has nothing left to lose except the truth. "They're going to inject him with potassium at 9 in the morning, Hayes said, her voice breaking, tears falling again. "There are less than 3 hours left. If you do not help me, the man who paid for your daughter's college will die, murdered in a hospital bed, believing no one fought for him." That hit Arthur like a physical punch. He recoiled a step. Harrison had paid for Kelly's nursing school when the bank denied the loan. Harrison had paid for Mrs. Helen's cataract surgery. Harrison was a good man surrounded by wolves. A hand touched Arthur's shoulder. It was Mrs. Helen, his wife, in a nightgown, her face etched with worry. She had heard everything. "Arthur," she said firmly, "open that gate. Helen, it's dangerous. Living without honor is dangerous, man. Open it. The girl is bleeding." Arthur closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and cursed under his breath. The sound of the key turning in the gate's lock was the most beautiful music Hayes had heard that night. "Get in quickly, before some nosy neighbor sees you," he grumbled, making space. "You look awful, girl. It looks like you fought a tractor and lost." Half an hour later, in Arthur's simple, clean kitchen, the smell of strong coffee tried to combat the scent of fear. Mrs. Helen cleaned Hayes's wounds with cotton, alcohol, and tears in her eyes, murmuring prayers softly. Hayes barely felt the sting. Her mind was counting the seconds. Arthur paced back and forth, nervous, drawing an imaginary map on the worn formica table. "The hospital is surrounded, Hayes," Arthur said, his voice tense. "I know the setup. Sloan hired Black Hawk, that private security firm of ex-police officers. There are 2 armed goons at the ICU door and a plainclothes officer at the reception because of the media coverage of the case. You won't get in through the front door, not even if you were the Pope. They have your picture." "I need to get in," Hayes insisted, holding her cell phone, which was now connected to an old charger plugged into the wall outlet. The screen showed 15% charge. She did not dare turn it on yet. She needed to save every electron for the crucial moment. "Your daughter, Kelly. She still works at hospital laundry services, doesn't she?" Arthur stopped abruptly. He looked at Hayes with terror. "Hayes, you are not going to involve my daughter in this. She just graduated, got this supervisory job. If she gets caught helping a fugitive, she loses her license. She loses everything." "I do not want her to know." Hayes grabbed his arm. "I swear, Mr. Arthur. I will not involve Kelly. I need access. The dirty laundry cart schedule, a uniform, anything." Arthur looked at the plate-shaped wall clock. 6:15 a.m. He ran a hand over his face, rubbing his tired eyes. "The delivery shift is at 7. The contracted laundry service truck comes in through the back, at the loading dock. The driver is my buddy, Hank. He owes me a gambling favor. He lost $100 to me playing cards last week." Hayes felt an electric jolt of hope. "Will he let me in? He will let the cart in. Whether you are inside the cart, underneath it, or disguised as a trash bag, that is your problem." Arthur picked up the keys to the old car from on top of the refrigerator. "And if he asks, I will say you are my niece from out of town, who needs a side gig as a helper." Hayes unplugged her cell phone from the charger. 22%. It would have to be enough. She put the device and the cable into the deep pocket of her uniform, quickly hugged Mrs. Helen, feeling the elderly woman's fragile body tremble. "God keep you safe, my child," Mrs. Helen whispered, kissing her forehead. "Let us go," Arthur said, opening the door. "We do not even have time to breathe." St. Jude's Medical Center was a fortress of mirrored glass and concrete. Police cruisers were parked at the main entrance at an alert angle, with their rotating lights off, but their presence intimidating. Journalists crowded the sidewalk like vultures, with cameras and microphones, awaiting the official news of the billionaire's death. Arthur stopped the Parati 2 streets back in a dark alley near the service entrance, where the smell of hospital waste and diesel fumes hung in the air. "There," Arthur pointed to a white box truck backing into the loading dock. "That's Hank." Arthur got out and went to speak with the driver. Hayes watched from a distance from inside the car, her heart in her mouth. She saw the 2 men talk. Hank shook his head negatively, crossing his arms. Arthur insisted, gesticulated. Hank seemed unyielding. Then Arthur took off his wristwatch, a golden Seiko that Harrison had given him as a 15-year service gift, and placed it in his friend's hand. Hank looked at his watch, sighed, and gave a discreet nod. Arthur ran back to the car, breaking out in a cold sweat despite the icy wind. "It is done. It cost me my watch, but it is done." He took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in his hands. But he said security is doubled inside. They are using handheld metal detectors on everyone at the employee entrance. You will not be able to get through with that cell phone if they search properly. Hayes froze. The blood drained from her face. And now? Now we improvise. Arthur opened the trunk and pulled out an old, dusty toolbox. He rummaged through rags and screwdrivers until he pulled out a bundle of dark blue fabric stained with grease. "Take this. It is my old mechanic's jumpsuit." He threw the jumpsuit to her. It smelled of burnt oil and old gasoline. "Put this on over your uniform. Tuck all your hair into this cap, and get some grease on your face. If they ask, you're Jay, his mute helper. The other helper is hungover and didn't show up." Hayes put on the overalls. They were huge, the legs too long, the sleeves swallowing her hands, but they covered her torn and bloody cleaning uniform. She tied her hair in a tight bun and hid it under the old gas station cap. She ran her hand over the dirty car floor and smeared grease on her cheek and forehead. "What about my phone?" she asked, feeling the weight of the device in her pocket. "If they pass the detector over my pocket, it'll beep. Put it in your boot. Or in your underwear, if you had any." Arthur attempted a nervous joke that wasn't funny at all. "The metal detector is manual. They'll pass it over your torso and waist. They'll hardly go down to your foot if you're pushing heavy cargo. If it beeps on your leg, pretend you have a surgical pin. Limp. Make a scene." Hayes took off her sneaker, placed her cell phone inside her thick sock on the inner side of her right ankle, praying the screen would not break from the friction. She put her sneaker back on. It hurt. "Let's go." Arthur held her face for a second. "Hayes, if they catch you, I never saw you." "I know. Thank you, Mr. Arthur." The walk to the loading dock felt like a march to the gallows. Hayes kept her head down, her shoulders hunched, trying to look like a small, tired man. Hank, the driver, said nothing, nor did he look at her face. He simply opened the side door of the truck and pointed to a huge metal cart full of white sheets packaged in plastic. "Push this and don't open your mouth," he whispered gruffly. "If you sneeze, I'll turn you in." Hayes took the cart. The wheels squeaked. They entered the loading zone. An armed security guard, in tactical uniform and holding a clipboard, stopped the group on the access ramp. "Badge?" Hank showed his, hanging from his neck. "And the helper?" the security guard asked, pointing his pen at Hayes. His gaze was clinical, suspicious. Hayes felt sweat trickle down her back inside the hot jumpsuit. "He's new," Hank replied quickly, chewing gum. "Jaws is hungover, couldn't even get out of bed. I had to grab my nephew to help. I forgot to get the temporary pass at the gate, boss. Let us through. The ICU is urgently requesting sterile sheets. You know how it is. The billionaire's case is driving everyone crazy up there. They change his bedding every half hour." The security guard looked at Hayes. Hayes kept her eyes on the floor, pretending to wipe her nose with her grease-stained sleeve. "Run the detector." The security guard picked up the black wand from the table. Hayes's heart stopped. The security guard passed the wand over Hank's body. Beep. Belt buckle. "Okay." Then he came to Hayes. He passed it over her arms. Beep. "What's that?" the security guard asked, touching her chest. "Jumpsuit button," Hank said, bored. "It's iron." The security guard grunted. He lowered the baton to his waist. It passed his thighs. It was going down. It was getting close to his knee. A little more, and it would reach his ankle. Hayes held her breath. If it beeped there, what would she say? Ankle pin. What if he told her to roll up her pant leg? The baton was at her shin. Suddenly, a loud noise came from the street. Whoop, 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 whoop! A car alarm blared wildly. Not a common alarm, but one of those ridiculous custom sirens that played the Godfather theme song. It was Arthur's Parati. He had done it on purpose. The security guard looked outside, annoyed, distracted by the infernal noise. What the hell is that? Who's the idiot? Must be some visitor parking where they shouldn't. Hank seized the opportunity, gently pushing Hayes's cart. So, boss, the sheet will get cold. Miss Kensington will have your guts for garters if the bed isn't ready. Sloane's name worked like magic. The security guard, fearing the relentless boss, retracted his baton before it reached Hayes's feet. Go, go. Get out of my sight. Hayes pushed the cart into the cold, white aseptic corridor. Her legs felt like jelly. She wanted to vomit from relief. Third floor. ICU Wing B, Hank whispered, without looking at her, and turned to the other side with another cart toward the laundry room. From here on, you are a ghost. If they catch you, I never saw you. Hayes was in. The hospital smelled of ether, liquid soap, and contained suffering. Hayes pushed the linen cart to the freight elevator. It was empty. She pressed button 3 with her elbow so as not to leave greasy fingerprints. As the elevator ascended, she began her transformation. She frantically pulled off the dirty jumpsuit, wadding it up in the corner of the cart. Underneath, the cleaning uniform was filthy. It wouldn't do. Hayes tore the plastic off one of the clean sheet packages. They were not sheets. They were lab coats. White lab coats for doctors sent for sterilization. Luck, Hayes thought. Or destiny. Hayes put on a white lab coat. It was a little big, but she rolled up the sleeves. She let her hair out from under her cap and tied it into a severe professional bun. She wiped the grease from her face with her own saliva and the hem of her overalls before hiding them at the bottom of the cart. Now Hayes was no longer the cleaner, nor the mechanic. She looked like an exhausted resident, or a nursing technician. The door opened on the 3rd floor. The air here was different, heavier, quieter. The air conditioning was stronger, colder. The intermittent sound of heart monitors, beep, 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 was the soundtrack of death hovering in that hallway. Hayes walked out, pushing the cart, using it as a shield and a disguise. At the end of the hallway, Hayes saw it, the double doors of ICU Wing B, the VIP area, 2 security guards in black suits, the same ones from the Black Hawk company that invaded the estate, stood like gargoyles in front of the frosted glass door. They had earpieces and their hands crossed in front of their bodies. There was no way to get past them. They knew her face. They had orders to shoot, to kill, or arrest. Hayes quickly retreated to an alcove where the coffee and snack vending machines were located. She looked at the digital clock on the wall. 8:15, 45 minutes until the fatal injection. She needed to get those men out of there. But how? She looked around. She saw the fire alarm panel on the opposite wall. In case of emergency, break glass. If she activated it, the entire hospital would go on high alert. Fire doors would close automatically. The chaos would be immense. Sirens would blare. But would the ICU security guards leave their posts? Probably not. Sloane's order was specific and paranoid. No one enters, no one leaves Harrison's room. Fire or flood. They would stay put. She needed something more direct, something that would play on their fear. Hayes saw a nurse leave a staff break room, leaving the door ajar as she went to the restroom. Hayes waited for her to turn the corner and entered the room. There was a coffee maker on, bags on the table, and an internal phone fixed to the wall. Hayes picked up the phone. She saw the laminated extension list on the wall. ICU Wing B Nursing Station, extension 304. She dialed. Through the corridor glass, up ahead, she saw one of the nurses at the station answer the phone. ICU, good morning. Hayes covered the mouthpiece with a dish towel that was in the sink to muffle and disguise her voice. This is the main reception. There's a commotion down here. Ms. Kensington? She fainted. She's having a heart attack in the lobby. She's screaming for her security guards now. What? The nurse looked confused and scared. But they have strict orders to stay at the room door. Ms. Kensington is giving the orders, Hayes yelled into the phone, imitating the hysterical tone of a panicked receptionist. She said if they don't come down now to carry her, they're all fired for cause. It's a medical emergency involving the money owner. Send them now. Hayes hung up before they could ask questions. She peeked through the crack in the staff breakroom door. She saw the nurse from the station run to the security guards at the glass door. She gestured frantically, pointing downwards. The security guards exchanged glances, hesitated. One of them grabbed his radio, trying to confirm with the ground floor team. "Do not use the radio, you idiot! Get down here now!" Hayes pleaded mentally, pressing her fingers against the doorframe. The radio must have been busy or out of signal in that concrete bunker, because the security guard cursed, hit the device, signaled his partner, and the two ran toward the passenger elevators. Their loyalty was to Sloane's money, not to protocol security. The fear of being fired was stronger. The hallway was clear. For now, Hayes left the break room. She walked quickly, with firm steps, like someone who belonged there, but without running to avoid drawing attention. She passed the nurse's station with her head down, pretending to read a clipboard she had picked up from the empty counter. The nurses were distracted, discussing Sloane's attack. Room 302. Harrison Vance. The door was closed. There was a no visitors sign. Hayes turned the doorknob, unlocked. She entered and gently closed the door behind her, leaning her back against the cold wood. She locked the door from the inside. The silence of the room was broken only by the rhythmic, mechanical sound of the ventilator and the heart monitor. Hiss, click, beep, beep, beep. The room was dimly lit. The blackout curtains were drawn, creating a tomb-like atmosphere. Harrison was lying in bed, surrounded by tubes, wires, and machines that blinked green and red lights. He looked smaller, more fragile. His skin was grey, almost translucent. His arms were covered in needle bruises. Hayes rushed to the bed. The tears she had held back all morning through the escape, the intrusion, and the fear finally overflowed. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, touching his hand with reverence. His hand was cold, inert. "I am here. I came back. I am sorry for the delay." She looked at his face. His eyes were closed. There was no sign of that flicker. He seemed to be gone. "Mr. Vance, if you can hear me, please do not give up. I need you to help me, just one more time. I know you are tired, but I will not let them win. I love you too much to let this happen." She confessed. For the first time, aloud, to the empty room. It was not love out of gratitude. It was a woman's love. She took her cell phone from her pocket. Her ankle was marked by the device. She turned it on. The Apple logo glowed. It seemed to take an eternity. Hayes looked at the door every second, waiting to see the doorknob turn. Finally, the lock screen appeared. Slide to unlock. Hayes slid her finger across the screen. Touch ID or passcode required. Hayes held Harrison's right hand, his index finger. It was rigid. The paralysis and the cold air conditioning had stiffened his joints. It felt like touching wax, not human skin. "Sorry, this will hurt a little," Hayes murmured, forcing his finger to straighten. She carefully positioned the phone. She pressed Harrison's fingertip against the home button. The phone vibrated. "Try again." Hayes's heart stopped. "Don't do this to me," she whispered. She wiped his finger with her lab coat sleeve. Maybe it was sweat. Maybe it was dry skin. Or maybe his circulation was so weak that the sensor couldn't recognize the heat. She tried again. She pressed more firmly, trying to mimic the pressure of a living finger. Try again. Panic exploded in Hayes's chest. What if biometrics didn't work on someone in a near-death state? What if his body was already giving up? She looked at the heart monitor. 48 beats per minute. Dropping. He was fading. The cold was winning. "No! Mr. Vance, please!" Hayes took his hand and placed it between her own. She rubbed his skin firmly. Then she brought his hand to her own neck to warm it against her warm skin. "I know you are in there. Wake up your finger. Send blood to your finger. Please, for me." She blew on his finger. She rubbed it gently to activate capillary circulation. Come on," she pleaded. Third attempt. If it failed too many times, the cell phone would ask for the numerical password and block the biometrics. It was the last chance. She positioned the finger. She held her breath. She closed her eyes. Click. The soft unlocking sound. Hayes opened her eyes. The home screen full of colourful icons was there. Open. Accessible. "Thank you, my God. Thank you," she sobbed. Trembling so much she almost dropped the device on the bed. She went straight to the recorder icon. There was a recent recording. Yesterday, 7:42 p.m. Duration, 14 minutes. Title, New Recording. Hayes pressed play. She turned the volume to maximum, holding it close to her ear. First, static. The sound of fabric rustling as the phone was hidden in the couch. Then silence, high-heeled footsteps. And then Sloane's voice, crystal clear, arrogant, cruel. "I thought this rat poison would never work. You're a tough cookie, my love, but finally, it's over." Hayes felt a shiver run through her soul. It was there, the absolute proof, the high-definition audio confession of murder. She needed to save it. Get it out of there. Send it to the cloud. Send it to the police, to the newspaper, to the world. She tapped share. She selected WhatsApp. She tried to connect to the hospital Wi-Fi, hospital visitantes. Connecting. The bar spun. It spun. Connection failed. Damn it, Hayes cursed. The Wi-Fi signal would not reach the shielded room. She disabled the Wi-Fi. She tried 4G, 1 bar. The signal fluctuated between 3G and no service. The ICU walls were lead-lined to block X-ray radiation. The room was a Faraday cage. She opened WhatsApp. She tried to send the file to her mother's number, sending 1%. The blue bar did not move. Hayes raised her cell phone high. She stood on her tiptoes. Nothing. She ran to the window. She pulled back the blackout curtain. The glass was thick, bulletproof, sending 5%. It was progressing. Slowly, but progressing. Suddenly the sound of a key turning in the door lock. Hayes froze. She did not have time to hide under the bed. She turned, hiding the cell phone behind her back, her heart pounding. The door opened. It was not the security guards. It was not the nurse. It was Dr. Julian Thorne. He entered, closing the door behind him with a soft click, looking at a medical chart, whistling softly. "Good morning, Harrison. Time for your final medicine. Let's get this over with." He stopped in the middle of the room. He saw Hayes. There was a second of absolute silence. Time stopped. Julian's brain tried to process the impossible image. The fugitive cleaner, dressed as a doctor, standing beside the bed of the man he was going to kill. Hayes saw his eyes go from her face to his hand, hidden behind his back, to the glow of the cell phone screen reflected in the window glass behind her. "You," Julian whispered, incredulous. Then a crooked smile formed on his lips. "How the hell did a rat like you get in here?" Hayes backed up to the head of the bed, placing herself physically between the killer doctor and the defenseless patient. "Get away from him!" Hayes yelled. Her voice was no longer one of fear. It was that of a lioness protecting her cub. "I know everything. I have the recording. If you take one more step, I'm sending it to the police right now. It's already sending." Julian looked at the cell phone in her hand. Then he looked at the room's walls. He laughed. A calm, terrible laugh from someone who was in control. He took the key from his pocket and locked the door again, putting the key away. "You won't be sending anything, dear," he said in a soft, didactic voice. He reached into his lab coat pocket and pulled out a prepared syringe. The liquid inside was clear and lethal, pure potassium. Because there's no cell service in this room. The walls are lead-lined. Didn't you know you trapped yourself in a cage with me? Hayes looked at the screen. Sending failure. The red error circle appeared. The file hadn't gone through. The evidence was stuck on the device. And she was trapped in the room. Julian advanced slowly, holding the syringe as if it were a dagger. And now I'll have to administer 2 doses. One for him, to stop that stubborn heart, and one for the depressive, who, overcome by guilt, committed suicide next to her boss with an overdose of sedatives. It will be a romantic tragedy, Hayes. The newspapers will love it. Hayes looked at Harrison, at his inert hand, then at the medical gas panel on the wall behind the bed. Oxygen, compressed air, vacuum, and the high-voltage outlets for life support equipment. She had no weapons. She was small. He was large, but she was in a room full of things that could explode, cut, or electrocute, and she had the rage of someone who had been humiliated. "Do not come closer," Hayes warned, dropping her cell phone on the bed and grabbing the heavy metal IV pole with both hands, tearing it from its base. The IV bag burst, wetting the floor. "It is over, Hayes," Julian said, his eyes cold and dead, preparing the needle. "No one will hear you scream in here." He attacked. The ICU room, designed to be a sanctuary of healing, had transformed into an arena of death. The sound of the IV pole hitting Dr. Julian Thorne's ribs echoed like a macabre gong. "Clang!" the doctor roared, doubling over his stomach. The impact was brutal, but not enough to bring down a man driven by the despair of watching his life crumble. The pain only fueled his rage. Julian was no longer the elegant and arrogant doctor. He was a cornered animal, teeth bared and eyes bloodshot. "You filthy bitch," he snarled, spitting saliva and hatred. "Do you think you can stop me with a piece of iron?" Hayes stepped back, tripping over the monitor wires. She held the metal rod like a spear, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "Don't come any closer," she cried, her voice cracking. "The police are coming!" "The police will find 2 corpses here," Julian advanced, ignoring the pain in his fractured ribs. He lunged at her with terrifying speed. Hayes tried to strike him again, but Julian caught the metal rod in mid-air. With a violent tug, he ripped the weapon from her hands and threw it away. The stand slid across the linoleum floor with a screeching hiss, knocking over trays of surgical instruments. Forceps, scissors, and scalpels rained down onto the floor. Hayes lost her balance and fell onto her back. The impact knocked all the air from her lungs. Before she could roll to the side, Julian's weight crushed her against the cold floor. His scent, a sickening mix of imported cologne, acrid sweat, and the metallic smell of blood from the scratch on his face, invaded Hayes's nose, making her gag. "Stay still!" he yelled, salivating over her face. "It will be quick. I am a doctor. I know where it hurts least." His large hands that should save lives, closed around her neck, not to strangle this time, but to pin her head against the floor. His other hand fumbled in his lab coat pocket, searching for the syringe that had not fallen. Hayes struggled like an animal caught in a trap. She scratched his face, digging her nails into his shaved skin, aiming for his eyes. Julian screamed and shook his head when she hit his ear, but he did not stop. He pulled out the syringe. The long needle gleamed under the white fluorescent light, trembling inches from Hayes's jugular. "Stop! Please!" Hayes cried, holding his wrist with both hands, using every fiber of strength she had left, her thin arms against his brute force. The needle descended, millimeter by millimeter. "Die! Just die and leave me alone." Julian forced his arm down, his face contorted in a grimace of madness. Hayes felt her muscles give way. The tip of the needle touched her neck skin, a cold sting announcing the end. She turned her face to the side, refusing to look at the killer. Her eyes found the bed. Harrison was there, motionless, a silent witness to her sacrifice. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, her voice strangled, saying goodbye. "I tried. It was in that split second that the sound in the room changed. The heart monitor, which had maintained a slow, hypnotic rhythm, went off. Beep, 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 beep. The frequency rose to 120, 140, pure adrenaline being pumped by a heart that refused to stop. A shadow moved on the bed. It was not a slow, awakening movement. It was a kinetic explosion. A pale hand, covered in purple bruises from venous punctures, shot from the bed like a snake strike. Harrison's fingers closed around Julian's neck, who was leaning over Hayes on the floor. It was not a weak grip from an invalid. It was the grip of a man who had accumulated hours of psychological torture, hatred, and powerlessness, channeling all his remaining vital energy into that single movement. Harrison's fingers sank into the flesh of the doctor's throat. Julian choked. His eyes bulged from their sockets. The pressure on his windpipe was so violent that it instantly cut off the airflow. Harrison pulled. With a guttural roar that seemed to come from the bowels of the earth, he used the weight of his own body, falling from the bed, to drag Julian backward. "Get your hands off her!" Harrison's voice came out ragged, hoarse, terrifying. It was not the voice of the polished billionaire. It was the voice of a wounded lion defending its mate. Julian lost his balance. He was pulled backward, falling flat on his back to the floor with a dull thud, hitting his head on the bed frame. The syringe flew from his hand, spinning in the air, and slid under the medicine cabinet. Hayes coughed, desperately pulling air into her burning lungs, and crawled away from the doctor on her hands and knees. She looked up, trembling. Harrison was hanging off the bed, his knees on the floor, his torso still on the mattress, tangled in sheets and tubes he had ripped out. His face was grey, covered in cold sweat, but his eyes were open, and they burned with a blue fire of pure fury. He was awake, and he was looking at her. "Hayes!" he gasped, extending a trembling hand to her. "Mr. Vance?" Hayes sobbed, crawling to him and holding his hand. He was ice cold, but his grip was strong. But the nightmare was not over. Julian, stunned and bleeding, tried to get up. He looked at Harrison with superstitious terror. The corpse had risen. The perfect plan had failed. "Impossible!" Julian stammered, wiping blood from his nose. "The dose! It was supposed to paralyze him for 24 hours. You should be a vegetable. Hatred," Harrison growled, trying to stand, but his legs failed him and he fell again. "Hatred metabolizes quickly, Doctor." Julian saw his weakness. He saw that Harrison could barely hold his head up. The doctor looked at the locked door, then at Hayes and Harrison, vulnerable on the floor. The killer's survival instinct spoke louder. He needed to finish the job. There were no witnesses outside. If he killed them both now, he could still escape and say he was attacked. Julian saw a scalpel gleaming on the floor. Near the foot of the bed, he picked it up. The small, sharp blade glinted. "Then die, both of you!" Julian yelled, standing up and advancing with the scalpel. Hayes placed herself in front of Harrison, spreading her arms like a human shield. "No!" she screamed. Julian raised his arm to strike. Boom! The bedroom door exploded inward. It was not opened. It was kicked in with a tactical blow that shattered the lock and the doorframe wood. 3 tactical police officers, wearing vests and with heavy weapons drawn, stormed the room, followed by the head of hospital security, who Hayes had tricked over the phone, but who ultimately came to check on the commotion after hearing the screams. "Police! Drop the weapon! Get on the ground! Now!" The sergeant's shout was so loud it made the window panes vibrate. Julian froze with the scalpel in the air. Time stopped. 3 red laser sights danced on the chest of the doctor's white lab coat. "Drop it, or I'll shoot you in the head," the sergeant roared, his finger on the trigger. The scalpel fell from Julian's hand with a harmless clatter on the floor. Julian slowly raised his hands, trembling, sweat dripping down his forehead and mixing with the blood. The arrogance had vanished. Only a pathetic coward remained. "Don't shoot! I'm a doctor," he whined, his voice thin. She attacked me, the cleaning lady. She snapped. She tried to kill the patient and I tried to defend him." For a second, the officers hesitated, looking at Hayes dressed in a torn lab coat and Harrison fallen on the floor. But Harrison, with a titanic effort, raised his voice. "Lies!" He pointed his trembling finger at Julian. "Arrest that murderer!" The officers needed nothing more. They advanced like a wave. One of them tripped Julian, throwing him face first onto the floor with violence. The doctor screamed as the officer's knee pressed into his back. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer yelled, pulling Julian's arms back until his shoulders were almost dislocated. The sound of the handcuffs closing, click-clack, was the most beautiful sound Hayes had ever heard in her entire life. Hayes fell to a sitting position, exhausted, resting her head against the side of the bed. Her entire body ached. A paramedic rushed to Harrison's aid, trying to lift him from the floor. "Sir, calm down. You need to lie down. Your vital signs are unstable." "Leave me alone." Harrison pushed the man's hand away, refusing to lie down. He dragged himself to sit on the floor next to Hayes. He touched her face, examining the purple mark on her neck where Julian had squeezed. "Hayes, are you all right? Talk to me." Hayes smiled through her tears and the grease stains. "I am, Mr. Vance. We did it. You're alive. Thanks to you. But the war was not over yet. The enemy army's general was still at large. The commotion in the hallway was deafening. Nurses, doctors, curious patients, and journalists who had breached the blockade crowded together. And, cutting through them like an icebreaker, she came. Sloane. She had just arrived at the hospital. She had been notified by the reception about her own heart attack, Hayes's prank call, and stormed upstairs, furious, ready to fire the entire staff for incompetence. Seeing the police at the ICU door, her heart leapt, but not from fear, from hope. "It's over," she thought, a cruel smile forming at the corner of her lips. Julian succeeded. They found the bodies. Harrison died, and the cleaner killed herself. She stopped in front of a mirror in the hallway. She adjusted her hair. She deliberately smudged her mascara to look like she had been crying. She took a deep breath to get into character. The tragic widow, the role of her life. Sloane entered the room, nearly running over a nurse. "What is happening here?" she cried out, her voice trembling and theatrical, bringing her hands to her mouth. "My fiancé! Where is my Harrison? Tell me he's not dead. For God's sake, don't tell me it's too late." Silence fell over the room like a heavy shroud. The police officers stepped back, creating an opening. And there he was, not dead, not in bed. Harrison was sitting in a wheelchair that the nurse had brought, being examined. He slowly raised his head. His eyes met Sloane's. Sloane stopped mid-stride. The blood drained from her face so fast that she looked like she had turned into a plaster statue. Her mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water, without a sound. "Harrison," she whispered, her voice fading. It was like seeing a ghost. "Good morning, dear," Harrison said. His voice was weak, hoarse, but laden with a deadly sarcasm that cut the air like a razor. "Sorry to disappoint. It seems I am, as you said last night. A tough cookie." Sloane took a step back, hitting her back against the doorframe. Her eyes frantically scanned the room. She saw Hayes sitting on the floor, alive, holding Harrison's hand. She saw Julian handcuffed in the corner, his nose bleeding, avoiding looking at her. Her world crumbled in a second. The perfect plan had turned to dust. But Sloane was a survivor, a born manipulator. Her brain worked at lightning speed. "Thank goodness!" she cried, her expression shifting from shock to relief in a split second. She ran to embrace Harrison, throwing herself at his feet. "My love, I thought I'd lost you. That doctor? He called me saying you were having a cardiac arrest." Harrison did not move. He did not touch her. He merely looked at her with deep disgust. "What happened here?" Sloane continued, crying copiously, clutching Harrison's legs. "This woman—" She pointed an accusing finger at Hayes. "Did she try to kill you again? Did she break into the ICU? Chief of Police!" She yelled at Chief of Police Baxter, who had just entered the room, out of breath. "Arrest this woman! She is a psychopath! She wants to kill my fiancée!" Chief of Police Baxter, confused, looked from Sloane to Hayes. Sloane's truth had always been law to him. "Handcuff the young woman!" The Chief of Police ordered an officer, pointing at Hayes. "No!" Harrison yelled, slamming his hand on the arm of the chair. "Nobody touches her!" "Harrison, you are confused, my love," Sloane said, caressing his face. "The poison affected your mind. She is dangerous. I'm here to protect you." Harrison grabbed Sloane's wrist and pushed it away with repulsion, as if her skin were toxic. "Enough with the act, Sloane. The curtain has closed. The audience has already left. What are you talking about? I am your fiancé. I love you. I spent the entire night awake praying for you." Harrison extended his hand to Hayes. "Hayes, the phone." Hayes, still trembling, stood up. She took the black iPhone from her lab coat pocket. The screen was cracked, stained with blood and grease, but it was on. Harrison took the device. He looked at Chief of Police Baxter. "Chief of Police Baxter, you arrested this young woman yesterday based on this woman's word and planted evidence. You almost condemned an innocent person and left my killer free. Now I want you to hear the true criminal's words." Harrison pressed play. The sound of the cell phone, amplified by the deadly silence of the room, echoed clear and crisp. The audio quality was terrifying. "I thought this rat poison would never take effect. You are a tough cookie, my love, but finally, it's over. Tomorrow is the wedding. Widow is a much more elegant title than divorced. I hope you don't stain the carpet with drool when you die." Sloane's voice filled the room. Every word was a nail in her coffin. The cruelty, the coldness, the confession of the slow poisoning, the concern for the carpet while her fiancé died. Chief of Police Baxter paled. Sweat ran down his forehead. He looked from Sloane to Harrison, realizing the magnitude of the lawsuit he would face for judicial error. Sloane heard her own voice as if it were a death sentence. The mask fell. The fake crying stopped instantly, her face contorted into a mask of pure, ugly, distorted hatred. When the audio ended, Harrison looked at her. "The only poison in this story, Sloane, has always been you, and I drank from it for too long." Sloane let out a hysterical scream, backing away. "This is a setup! It's artificial intelligence! They forged this!" she screamed, her shrill voice breaking. "That gutter trash planned everything. She wants my money. Are you going to believe these people? I am Sloane Kensington." Harrison gave a tired signal to the Chief of Police. "Arrest her. Aggravated attempted murder, obstruction of justice, false imprisonment, conspiracy, and torture. I think 30 years is too lenient, isn't it, Baxter?" The Chief of Police, trying to save the rest of his career, did not hesitate. He knew which way the wind was blowing now. "Ms. Sloane Kensington, you are being arrested, caught red-handed." He pulled out the handcuffs. Sloane freaked out. She tried to run. She pushed the Chief of Police and ran into the hallway, knocking over a tray of medications. "Let me go! You can't arrest me! I know the governor! I'll ruin your lives!" she shrieked as 2 police officers grabbed her in the hallway. Journalists' cameras flashed blindingly. Sloane was filmed being thrown against the wall, disheveled, makeup smeared, screaming obscenities. The click of handcuffs on her wrists was broadcast live across the country. The socialite queen had fallen. In the room, silence returned. But now it was a silence of peace, of cleansing. Harrison leaned back in his chair, exhausted, as if he had run a marathon. He looked at Julian, who was being lifted by the police officers to be taken away. "Get this butcher out of here." And make sure he loses his medical license before he even reaches the police station. Julian left with his head down, crying, without saying a word. Harrison and Hayes were left alone amidst the medical team. Harrison extended his hand to her again. Hayes approached shyly. She was dirty. Her uniform was rags. She smelled of grease and sweat. Harrison took her hand. He did not mind the dirt. He brought her calloused and bruised hand to his lips and kissed its palm, lingeringly. "You saved my life," he said, his voice choked, his eyes watering. "Twice. You faced the police, broke into my house, entered this hospital. Hayes, why? I'm just your boss. I never gave you anything but a salary." Hayes felt the warm tears wash the grease from her face. She squeezed his hand. "You were never just my boss, Mr. Vance. You were the only one who asked if I was okay. The only one who looked at me like a person. And love cannot be explained. It is only felt." Harrison smiled, and for the first time in years, his smile reached his eyes completely. "Then I promise, I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that love." The morning sun bathed the garden of the Vance estate, which was unrecognizable. The dark, geometric, and oppressive hedges that Sloane loved had been torn out by the roots. The cold marble statues had been donated. Now, the garden was alive. Beds of gardenias, jasmine, sunflowers, and white roses burst with colors and scents, attracting butterflies and birds. The house seemed to breathe again. Hayes was kneeling in the soft earth, planting a rare orchid seedling. She was not wearing a uniform. She wore a light yellow cotton dress, her loose hair swaying with the gentle breeze. She seemed part of the garden. "Hayes!" Harrison's voice came from the veranda. She turned, smiling, shielding her eyes from the sun with her dirt-stained hand. Harrison descended the stone steps. He still used an elegant wooden cane, a temporary after-effect of the paralysis in his legs, but he walked with vigor. Color had returned to his face. He had gained weight and looked 10 years younger. He walked up to her, admiring the scene. "What did I say about you messing with the heavy soil?" He pretended to be angry, but his eyes sparkled. "Oh, Harrison!" No, she laughed, standing up and wiping her hands on her gardening apron. "Old habits die hard, and the new gardener doesn't know how to talk to the plants. They need affection to grow." Harrison held her hands, stained with black soil. He adored those hands. "Hayes, I need to give you some serious news. I had a meeting with my lawyers earlier today." Hayes's smile faltered a little. Her heart gave a small leap of insecurity. The scars of the past still hurt. Had the social difference finally become too much? Had his rich friends said something? "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft. "It's about your position in the house. I'm very sorry, but you're fired." Hayes's world stopped. The air vanished. "Fired," she repeated, stunned. "But did I do something wrong? The plants, the dinner." Harrison released her hands and knelt on the grass. He winced in pain from his knee, but he did not care. He stayed at her level, looking deep into those brown eyes that had saved him. "You are fired from your position as housekeeper, governess, gardener, and savior of the nation." He took a small blue velvet box from his jacket pocket. "Because I cannot be married to my employee. It would be against the house rules, and I intend to break all the rules with you." Hayes covered her mouth with her dirt-stained hands, her eyes filling with tears. Harrison opened the small box. A simple, delicate ring with a solitaire diamond that shone brighter than the sun rested there. Nothing exaggerated and vulgar like the jewels Sloane demanded. It was pure, transparent, and eternal, like Hayes. "Hazel Davis, do you accept to be the mistress of this house, the mistress of my heart, the mother of my future children, and the only woman I want to see every day when I wake up and before I sleep?" Hayes looked at him, at the man who had been dead and was now there, kneeling at her feet. "I accept," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I accept, Harrison. 1,000 times I accept." He took the ring from the box and slid it onto her dirt-stained finger. It was the most perfect contrast in the world, the diamond and the fertile earth, wealth and simplicity united. Harrison stood up and pulled her into a kiss, a slow, deep, passionate kiss, sealed under the sunlight, far from the shadows of the past. On the house's balcony, Mr. Arthur, reinstated as head of the fleet and wearing a spotless new uniform, and Mrs. Helen, now head housekeeper, watched the scene, embracing and wiping away tears with handkerchiefs. "I knew it," Arthur sniffled. "From the day she broke into my house at 4 in the morning, I knew it would end in marriage." Justice had been served in the courts. Sloane and Julian would pay for their crimes for decades. But there, in that garden, something greater had happened. Love had conquered death, and Hayes, the cleaner who became a queen, had finally found her castle. Did you like this story? Do you think Sloane and Julian got what they deserved? Or was it not enough? Tell me in the comments.